Welcome back again, ladies and gentlemen. If I sound off at all in this recording, it's just because I have a little bit of a cold. Hopefully it'll be over in a couple days. Anyway, let's jump into the video. For the last 6 months or so, I think I've been one of the few people in the Zelda community who thinks that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are of similar quality. Sure, I personally prefer Breath of the Wild, but I didn't necessarily think it was better than Tears, at least not objectively. They're very similar games, but they do both have a few strengths and weaknesses that play off each other in very different ways, and prior to now, I didn't think that it was really fair to say that one was an objectively better game than the other. Then I bought and played the DLC for Breath of the Wild, and now I'm not sure about my opinion anymore. Suddenly I find myself leaning more and more towards Breath of the Wild being the better game. And yes, I realize that most of y'all have played through this DLC before, and that a lot of this video's content is old news and old opinions. But this is my channel, and I'll talk about what I want. I generally ascribe to the point of view that if a game has DLC, then the DLC is likely to be the best content that game has to offer. I know that this isn't always the case, but it often is, due to some factors that take more time to explain than I want to spend in this video. When I started up my main file and received the 2 main quest editions, I was ready to go. But then, look at all these new quests. The DLC for Breath of the Wild adds a surprising amount of content. But I don't want to just tell you that it's good, and I can't just show you because this video isn't a Let's Play. So I want to tell you why the DLC additions are not only good, but better than any of the content in the base Breath of the Wild or most of Tears of the Kingdom. First of all, we have the Champion's Ballad. The questline is, I think, the most diverse questline in either Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. There are a ton of unique elements and ways in which this quest gets you to interact with the world in ways that you hadn't before. The one-hit obliterator section makes combat not only actually challenging for once, but it forces you to approach that challenge completely differently from what you're probably used to. Gone is the pause menuing to eat full-course meals mid-battle. The only way through this section is careful planning and swift execution. And then you know how one of the big weak points of Breath of the Wild in the first place is its shrines? Well, the new shrines that are part of this trial are bloody awesome. Except for the ones with these motion-controlled apparatuses, those are still cursed. Wait a minute, let me just disengage my Joy-Cons from the gamepad. And, not so tedious now, are ya? Shrines have a lot of puzzles, and puzzle taste is subjective, but I think that these shrines as puzzles are some of the best in the game. There's also a satisfying amount of variety in the missions in this main quest line after you get done with the one-hit obliterator challenge. Sometimes you have to go find a location, sometimes you have to defeat a few of a specific type of enemy, sometimes you have to go snowboarding, sometimes you have to go seal sledding, sometimes you gotta do some light puzzle solving. There's just much more variety in this quest line than there really is in the rest of the main quest line of the game. There's also some great new cutscenes related to the champions in the Ballad. The narrative for Breath of the Wild was more or less complete beforehand, so none of these new added memories in the questline are necessarily huge tearjerkers or anything, but they sure do a better job of fleshing out the characters and the lore than the first set of champion memories ever did. And the idea that Daruk is scared of dogs is a hilarious detail to add, even if it was entirely unnecessary. It's interesting that these added memories are all from Zelda's perspective rather than Link's, since that must mean that those memories are being sent telepathically straight into Link's head or something, which is interesting for the lore, but not problematic. I certainly didn't mind refighting the Blight Ganons either, since they're made uniquely challenging by restricting your gear, which bears a lot of the same gameplay benefits as the Trial of the Sword or the Tears of the Kingdom Proving Grounds shrines. The addition of another dungeon is also excellent, and I think it's the best Zelda dungeon I've played through. Yes, that does mean I think it's better than the Link to the Past dungeons. I'm sorry, I just didn't like those dungeons that much. Wouldn't be a barbecue video without at least one hot take, right? The new dungeon has got the same repetitive aesthetic as the other shrines and beasts, but the room design and the puzzles themselves are, I think, on average of quite high quality. Except for that one where I had to pull off this awkward little wind bomb since I couldn't figure out how to do it correctly. The final DLC boss is also mucho funzo. It's got a little bit more to it than the other Breath of the Wild boss fights, and the pace is quite a bit quicker, which I absolutely adore. Like the other boss fights, it's still not super challenging, but it is a lot of fun. And the rewards for these quests is decent enough as well. It's obviously nice to be able to use Annoying Birdman's Gale more often, and the initial one-hit Obliterator quest gives you some more Spirit Orbs for extra health, because if you've gotten this far into the game, let's face it, your stamina is probably already maxed out. And of course, the motorcycle is an awesome final reward, regardless of how much or how little sense it makes. After getting it, I immediately spent over an hour just riding all over Hyrule Field. The motorcycle feels like such a weirdly natural way to explore Hyrule that it's hard to even question how silly it may be. And since it needs fuel occasionally, I finally have something to do with my 200 Hinox teeth. No matter how good of a vehicle designer you aren't going to be able to build something that runs quite like this in Tears of the Kingdom. It is so fast and smooth and natural, it's amazing. Also, for some reason, it's water soluble. I don't know why that's how it works, but okay. The second thing I want to mention is the Trial of the Sword. I think this must have been what inspired the Proving Grounds shrines in Tears of the Kingdom, because it's the same basic idea, but on steroids. There's something about the unusual constriction of having limited gear that makes the combats very satisfying. It is a bit frustrating that you have to start all the way over at the beginning of whichever section you're in if you die, but as someone who still plays Rogue, I don't think I really have room to complain about that too much. Okay, this isn't so much of a complaint, but there are some things that I would have liked to see in Breath of the Wild DLC that aren't there. Like maybe a secret ending with a harder boss, and some lore behind how Calamity Ganon ended up under Hyrule Castle, and maybe a couple more non-Blight Ganon boss fights, but really that's too much to add all in DLC, so they'd probably have to split it into its own game. Oh wait, that's exactly what they did. I don't know if DLC definitively makes Breath of the Wild better than Tears of the Kingdom, since Tears still has some things that Breath of the Wild doesn't, like Ultra Hand and Fuse. I don't care much about Ultra Hand and kind of hate Fuse, but that's neither here nor there. I still don't think that either game is objectively better, since each game does different things well, but the DLC certainly adds to Breath of the Wild's value, and I finally get why people were so disappointed when it was announced that there wasn't going to be DLC for Tears of the Kingdom. Anyway, that's all for the day. The subs may have noticed that there aren't as many videos being uploaded to the channel recently, and I'll probably address that at some point soon-ish in the future. But the short of the story is that 1, a large chunk of my free time has been reallocated because all of my hobbies have large time requirements, and 2, I also want to figure out a way to talk about games other than Zelda without all the subs abandoning me. Anyway, that's the end of this video.